Hi, welcome to Info Dumpies. My name's Brianne. I'm autistic, I have ADHD, my pronouns are she, her, and if I really need to get something done, I can make myself practically neurotypical for about half an hour if I drink an entire pot of coffee, smoke a bunch of weed, and then work out. Hi, this is a solo dump. This solo dump is about dopamine activities for ADHD. If you are new here and you don't know what I mean by solo dump, usually there's a second lady on the call here, Violet, but for solo dumps, it is just me, and I talk about something relating to autism, ADHD, and how to help you live your best life with both of those. So today we're going to talk about dopamine activities for ADHD. I think on paper, most of you understand ADHD likes dopamine, but we're going to talk about the intentional inclusion of dopamine generating activities into your day-to-day life to help you manage your ADHD. I am raw dogging my ADHD. I do not take meds. This is not going to be and if you take meds, that's good for you. No, literally, if they didn't have medication shortages on the regular, I would still be on my meds. It was just too much for me to manage having to call a different pharmacy every fucking month just to make sure I had my medication. It became too much for my autism to medicate my ADHD, if that makes sense. So whether you're on meds or not, I think all of these are good because meds are just part of the equation when it comes to managing your ADHD. But I think especially if you are unmedicated, for me, having my regular sort of stable of dopamine generating activities I really and truly helps me function the best I possibly can without meds. And also working for myself, I have a lifestyle that's just much more conducive to working in a way that feels natural to me, which is a privilege I really have. But one of the cornerstones of managing my ADHD without my meds is my dopamine activities that I do. And we're going to talk about fast dopamine versus slow dopamine. We're going to get into why the hell do we even need dopamine as humans. This is not going to be a description of the dopamine menu as coined by Jessica McCabe of How to ADHD. I think that is a great tool for a lot of people, and that framework is helpful for a lot of people. But my autism and chronic illness, I think, makes it where I can't engage in a lot of the dopamine menu activities I might make one day versus another day. My energy levels, my sensory sensitivities, my physical health changes day to day so much that some of the things on a traditional ADHD menu, as coined by McCabe, are just not accessible to me that often. So I need something a little more flexible because both my body and my capacity are just not going to be able to tolerate the same input day to day. So if you're unfamiliar with the concept of a dopamine menu, I highly recommend looking it up. That might be a way of organizing your dopamine generating activities that you find helpful. Just personally, in my personal experience with myself and then with some of my clients who have done the dopamine menu, I do think it gets a little more difficult to make something that feels that permanent and that is not subject to change that often when you have something like chronic illness, additional disabilities like autism. I think it does complicate it, but I do recommend going to check out the dopamine menu. Also, and just all of How to ADHD's content. It's really good stuff. But yeah, so we won't be doing a dopamine menu per se. We're just going to talk about dopamine generating activities to help act as a springboard for you to think of those things that you might want to incorporate in your day-to-day more often to help you feel regulated. If you listened to the old, and I kind of want to remake it because it's like my most listened to episode, the sensory diet episode, there will be some overlap here. My dopamine activities tend to also be things that are stimmy to me for my autism. So some of these you can get two birds stoned at once and help regulate your autism and help give your ADHD some dopamine, which I think is pretty great. These are all things I integrate into my routine, so I don't actively have to think about, hey, what am I going to do to help my ADHD today? So why do humans have dopamine in the first place? I think having more of an understanding of what dopamine actually does other than make you feel good can be helpful here. Evolutionarily speaking, dopamine is there to make things necessary to our survival feel like a desirable task to do. And the TLD are eating and fucking, basically. Those two things. We're more likely to survive as a species if we get some sort of reward for eating food and fucking. Dopamine is meant to keep us alive. So if you have ADHD and you are not getting dopamine and processing it the same way as other folks, that would certainly make things like, work and your job hard to do when you're not getting the neurochemicals you need to make that feel rewarding. Like, one of the things that helped keep humanity alive, we process differently. One of the reasons, just to circle back, that I'm not doing the dopamine menu sort of paradigm proper is that some of those suggestions are also very socially oriented, because getting dopamine from social situations is also one of the things that it's meant to do. But that becomes more complicated when you're also autistic. So even if you like socializing, we do not get the same neurochemical rewards as someone who is not autistic when it comes to socializing. Social interaction tends to increase already higher than baseline cortisol in autistic people. When we're trying to feel motivated and focused, increasing cortisol doesn't really feel that productive. So while we don't have data on how AuDHD brains balance the dopamine and cortisol in social interactions, just understand, like, just my lived experience, there are some days where I don't want to fucking socialize, but if I make my list of dopamine activities and that includes calling a friend, sometimes the autism will go on autopilot and go, guess I need to call a friend to help, feed my ADHD, and that might not be the answer that day. So that's one of the reasons I want to keep things kind of broad, because socializing is one of the things that can generate dopamine, but that is way more complex when you also have autism on top of that. In people with ADHD, they discovered in the 1960s that dopamine-increasing drugs helped improve our focus. They erroneously inferred that this means that ADHD was caused by a dopamine deficit. Even though we know better than that now, there are books and social media content that still push this misinformation that we're deficient in dopamine and that's the cause. Through years of research and advances in brain imaging technology, ideas on the ADHD and dopamine connection were now under the umbrella term of the dopamine hypothesis. So this hypothesis says that some dopamine dysregulation must be present, but it's not as simple as a deficit of a single neurotransmitter. This is why stimulant drugs don't help a good chunk of folks with ADHD. I want to say it's something like 85% of people the meds tend to help, but there's still a sizable chunk of folks who don't see all that much help in managing their ADHD with stimulant meds. It's not as simple as replacing one neurotransmitter. Aberrant dopamine signaling and possibly serotonin are also factors in ADHD, but we still don't quite understand the full scope of what that means. In the 2000s, researchers started seeing if the drug atomoxetine, which blocks neurons from reabsorbing noradrenaline, which dopamine is the precursor for noradrenaline, had a similar effect. So it turns out atomoxetine did have a similar effect to stimulant drugs for dopamine. And this is when researchers were able to see that ADHD had something to do with the transmitters themselves and started looking at genetic links. The TLDR of all of this, the actual structure and function of our dopamine receptors might sweep dopamine away more quickly in ADHD, among other things, but we don't know anything for certain yet. But one of the prevailing theories is that something about how our dopamine receptors operate, we are just blasting through that shit faster. And the genetic link of this is structural, this is developmental, was something they figured out in the early 2000s. So what's the takeaway from this if you have ADHD? We need dopamine. We need more of it. We need it pretty often. If our frontal lobe is going to get involved in doing a whole hell of a lot, we need to make sure we get the dopamine we need. I also want to address the pseudoscience and social media fad of doing a dopamine fast. The biohacking people are into doing these dopamine fasts, but it is pseudoscience. It's bullshit. There is no way to keep your brain from producing some dopamine, and that's fucking good. You need it. You don't want to stop dopamine, and your ADHD needs more dopamine than a non-ADHD brain. The concept of a dopamine fast was a term coined by California psychiatrist Dr. Cameron Sepah. I couldn't find the pronunciation, but it's Sepah. And he said that he didn't mean for it to be taken literally. To which I say maybe he should have considered what he was saying for about 5 minutes longer. But when Dr. Sepah was working on coining the term and the concept of the dopamine fast, he was meaning it to be a method based on cognitive behavioral therapy to help people with addictive behavior. So, addictive behaviors like doomscrolling provide you a quick hit of dopamine that quickly dips back down to baseline. Slower, more delayed gratification provides a more sustained release of dopamine and isn't going to trigger the same addiction areas as something that is a quick hit of dopamine. So his initial intention was to have people spend some tech-free time being bored. That was the entire scope of what he intended, to be bored more often, cut out the quick dopamine. Thanks to him choosing a dramatic, non-literal name for his method, social media is now flooded with dopamine fast content that doesn't do what the creator intended at all and spreads new fun misinformation, that's sarcasm, like dopamine resets. So if you see people online saying, I'm doing a dopamine fast, and they're not listening to music, not talking or interacting with people, not being photographed, which is okay, I don't get photographed, whatever, not eating, and not exercising. This sucks, and that's maladaptive, really, in an attempt to regain control. So if you see stuff about a dopamine fast, you don't need to fast from your dopamine. You need more dopamine. You need to get it in healthy ways. There is no way to fast from dopamine, and even if there were, you wouldn't want to. So you might have guessed it, but ADHD in our relationship to dopamine is one of the reasons that we are more prone to substance abuse issues. If you also have autism on top of that, congrats, buddy. You got another thing that might make you more prone to substance abuse issues. For me, having more slow dopamine activities really helps my addictive personality. Just a little peek behind the curtain here with some Brianne lore. My bio dad loved cocaine and loved drinking. Wrecked my mom's 1994 Altima doing coke and drinking. My mom has an opioid addiction, and I very much am afraid of the same stuff. So I did not have a good relationship with alcohol, and I have not drank since June 29th of 2019. My relationship to weed used to not be good, and I would bring an edible to eat at work that I knew would wear off by the time work ended because I couldn't make it through the day without it, and now I'm just having a little something at night to help me sleep. Really understanding that I needed that stimulation, I needed that dopamine, and I was trying to get it in unhealthy ways has really helped to the point that I don't feel like, ooh, I need to smoke. Ooh, I wish I could go have a drink. I don't really feel that anymore. And that's not to say this is going to cure an addiction for somebody, but for me, needing the stimulation was certainly the root of my dopamine-seeking activities that ended up being fast dopamine and not very healthy for me. So, fast versus slow dopamine. I've said this, I'm going to explain. When we get drug fast, more addicting, to put it in as few words as possible. There was an interesting study published in 2024 called Brain Connectivity to Fast versus Slow Dopamine Release. In this study, participants were given the drug methylphenidate, aka Ritalin or Concerta, either IV or orally. They found that the effects of these drugs depended greatly on how fast they spiked dopamine. The people who received the drug via IV, aka the fast dopamine route, versus orally, It was found that it had more of a subjective experience of drug reward. A quote from the study: fast dopamine increases are uniquely associated with connectivity patterns that have relevance for the subjective experience of drug reward. So, stuff like staring at your phone and scrolling through TikTok to help hype yourself up and give yourself the stimulation you need to go do dishes is not really going to work because it is spiking the drug reward part of your brain, and you're just sitting there looking at TikTok for a while, maybe not even thinking that you're going to do dishes, or maybe thinking about how much you need to go do dishes and hating yourself while you keep scrolling. So if you can try to get more slower releases of dopamine, so you don't have to try to get the fast hit of dopamine, overall, you're going to help your focus. And this is not to say that all of the activities you do that give you dopamine fast are bad and don't do them. I still smoke weed at some times that are not in the evening because I want to. But the point is, I have other things I'm doing, like sewing, to get the slow dopamine, to make sure that this is not that weed and sex and sugar and, alcohol are not the scaffolding that's holding my little life together. It's more to find some balance where you are choosing the healthier thing more often and making it easier for yourself to focus. Fast versus slow dopamine activities. Fast dopamine activities, like I've mentioned, drugs, sex, food, scrolling social media, caffeine, video games. Some of my favorite things really in that list. Anything that makes you feel good pretty quickly, pretty instantly. And like I said, this is not to make us not do any of these fast versus slow dopamine activities. My goal was never to tell someone to never crank their hog and smoke weed again. That's just antithetical to who I am as a person. But we also need to have the slow dopamine activities, which are really things that have more delayed gratification. So writing, gardening, working out, getting enough protein, weirdly, because both the amino acids tyrosine and phenylalanine are needed for dopamine production. Delayed gratification stuff like meditation. I did a whole episode on meditation and how meditation changes your brain. If you didn't listen to it and you're listening to this episode, I recommend you hop over to that one next. Meditation is a really easy way to increase dopamine and also just help your executive function skills in general over time and cause actual structural changes to your brain. Also, setting and achieving long-term goals, which I know is really vague. I'm working on a lot of artistic stuff that's going to be a really long-term goal. I'm working on a lot of gardening stuff that's a really long-term goal. And when I tell you the high I get when I finish those things, sometimes in working out, like I received a weight bench back in November for my birthday from my darling partners, because I had been working out at home and trying to do as much as I could without one. So I finally had a proper bench press set up, and the highlight of my week thus far was that I benched 155. And back in November, I was at 135. So that was exciting for me. So more long-term goals, and like my goal this year is to try to be able to bench 165 or 170 by the end of the year. And I think I can do it, but setting and achieving long-term goals, even if they're not huge things like I want to open a bookstore or something massive, just some kind of long-term goals. And journaling also. Journaling can really be helpful. I'm actually working on another episode of Info Dumpies about types of journals. But anything that's really delayed gratification, the stuff that you really want to focus on, fiber art, sewing, like just anything that is fun and takes a while, and there's delayed gratification to it, cooking, baking. Pretend that you are one of my clients. We're going to find time during the week for you to do any of the slow dopamine activities you might add to a list. So if you're figuring out what to do with this episode, I think the thing I would do is write out a list of the things that bring you joy to work on that are delayed gratification and consider how you can intentionally add those things to your week. And why would you want to add those slow dopamine activities to your week? I'm glad you asked. Our brains try to reach homeostasis with our neurochemicals. There is a specific output our brain is used to, and if we're getting, if something outside force comes and changes those neurochemicals, our brain will feel a little weird for a little while, but then it kind of levels out because our brain is like, oh, I don't need to produce as much blank. So that's why if you have been put on a new brain med by one of your doctors, there's a couple weeks where you're like, ooh, I feel funky, and then things really do level out. Something I tell clients a lot when they are first starting ADHD medication is like, I know you feel great today, and there's like a real high the first couple of weeks on an ADHD medication. Not even like a drug high, but like, oh my God, I've never functioned this well and been so calm kind of high. And it levels out. Like, you definitely notice when you forget to take your meds, but it really does level out. It is when you are used to getting this fast dopamine from other things, and you're relying on those things quite often, your brain is responding in kind to those constant increased hits of dopamine. So if you can transition yourself to slower dopamine activities, you might have more sustained concentration, and your brain can kind of get used to doing the slower things more and concentrate better over time. So, some of the benefits of choosing some slow dopamine activities are actually just increased ability to concentrate. You'll have more stable dopamine levels because it's not like, it's kind of like eating, some Sour Patch Kids versus eating a bowl of fruit. They're both sugar. They're both sugar to your body, but one of them is also coming with fiber and vitamins and minerals and all of these other things. Both delicious, both good, and both Sour Patch Kids and a bowl of fruit have a place in my life. But I know that one is going to make me feel different than the other one. And I know that one comes with a bunch of extra bonus stuff that I will be thankful for later. This also helps you with your executive function skills. If you're not familiar, executive function is actually like 12 different skills in a trench coat. And I also did a solo dump episode about that. If you haven't listened and you want to go listen, your executive function is going to get better. Some people will come see me for coaching saying they're looking for an executive function coach, which I really don't like that name, because a lot of what comes with ADHD is the fact that you are literally disabled in some of those skills. There's some things that you can get better at, and doing slow dopamine activities will help you improve in the areas where you're able to improve, but there will simply be some things that are involved in executive function that you are, as good as it gets is not good enough to manage in day-to-day life, and you have to find ways to accommodate and work around that. But for the things that you can improve, those can be helped by focusing on more slow dopamine activities and making those a regular practice. And then another thing that happens a lot of the time with people that come to see me, you have less time lost on unfulfilling things. It is pretty common for people to tell me that they spend time doing a bunch of stuff, but it's not the stuff they want to do. And it's usually scrolling on social media, or, I played this one video game and I haven't really done a whole hell of a lot else unless I absolutely had to do it. And people get really frustrated feeling trapped doing those things that, yeah, they enjoy, but they don't really do the things they want to do in life apart from that, because those are the things they're stuck doing. So making an effort to try to incorporate more slow dopamine activities can help you actually do things that you find more fulfilling. Like doing podcasting started off as one of my slow dopamine activities. It still is, and now people listened to it, which was not what I expected, but here we are. I feel like I get to do so much fulfilling stuff now that I've really tried to focus on doing those creative things that bring me joy and give me that slow dopamine. And I think one of the reasons to focus on more slow dopamine activities might seem a little odd, but it's anti-capitalist as hell. We live in an attention economy. People want your attention all of the time. Short form video has changed social media forever, and things have to capture your attention even faster. I have to use Instagram for work, and I know if I want a reel to pop off, I need to do something dramatic in the very first seconds of the video, or people will drop off because attention is the thing they're trying to get and the thing that everyone on these apps is vying for. I say it as someone who deliberately tries to get attention on those apps because I do get a lot of work through there. But these companies also want your attention. They want your attention to sell you things. They want your attention to make it easier to manipulate you. We, Americans, we're constantly distracted with things while all of our rights are being stripped away right and left. The idea that you would choose not to engage in that the way they want you to and have that be what you're focused on all of the time, that's pretty fucking punk rock. They want you addicted to their apps. They want you to buy their food. They want you to spend what precious little life we all get on this planet glued to the things they're trying to sell you or convince you are okay or distract you with. Working on appreciating slow gratification is a rejection of capitalism and white supremacy's right to comfort. It is somewhat comforting to be able to dissociate in front of an app and not think about all of the horrors of the world, but we do kind of need to make sure we're disengaging from that to go help each other out. So the more that you can say, hey, this quick hit of dopamine is all well and good, but I do need to do more things outside of this app and go touch grass, that is a rejection of capitalism. It puts you in a better place to both help yourself and help your community. There are things we can do only if we no longer let them decide what we pay attention to. So if I were going to suggest to you how to start incorporating more slow dopamine activities into your routine, I would first make a list of the things you like. Some of those things for me are just taking a bubble bath. They don't have to be really extensive. Sometimes it's doodling. Sometimes it's reading. Reading's a really good one. I've been going through all of the Dungeon Crawler Carl books at an alarming speed, and that's been one of my favorite ones lately. I will read my Dungeon Crawler Carl books on the stationary bike, so I'm also getting more slow dopamine from moving my body. But make a list of the things that you enjoy doing that are slow gratification, that require you to focus for some period of time. You're not going to be able to focus on them like you did when you were a teenager yet, but you can. You can get there. The focus does exist there, and you can get it back. But I would make a list, and then I would prioritize doing those on a regular basis. It doesn't have to be daily that you're doing the same things, but having something you do every day to help you with that slow dopamine, I think, is the point. So for me, every single day, the things I do are have a little bit of time to meditate. I have time to work out 6 days a week. On the day I'm not working out, I also have gardening if it's gardening season. I have time to read a little bit every day. Working out, meditation, and reading help me in more ways than just giving me more dopamine. So I really like to pick activities that do more than one thing for me, if that makes sense. All of those things help my autism. All of those things help my nervous system in general. All of those things help me, in a healthy way, apart from just increasing my dopamine, because I am not interested in waking up at 4 to go do a bunch of extra shit to give myself dopamine. I'm going to try to do the best I can with the time I have. So I think also don't make it take 4 hours, but I would be first, make a list. Second, prioritize doing those slow dopamine activities regularly, doing at least something each day. And then I would, third, set limits and boundaries around fast dopamine activities. This one's hard. You're having to kind of parent yourself. Like for me, I'm not allowed to touch weed until I've seen my last client of the day. I am not allowed to just sit in front of the TV unless it's after like 7 and I'm kind of winding down for bed. Sugar used to really be a way. I used to get fast dopamine. That just gives me a headache now if I have too much sugar. So that one kind of sets a limit for me. But setting limits around those things that I knew I used to turn to try to get that quick hit of dopamine, not cutting them out completely, because when we completely deprive ourselves of things, nothing makes us want them more. There have been numerous studies on how being deprived of something makes someone want that specific thing so much more. So I do smoke weed, and I'll smoke it while I work out. I'll have a little bit before bed, but that's in the evening. I will have sugar. I had pie James made this weekend. That was my whole dinner, was pie. It was delicious. So the point is not to never do these things, but you're prioritizing the slow dopamine activities and set yourself some clear limits and boundaries around fast dopamine activities. And then fourth, finally, I think remember it, progress, not perfection. Perfection is not real. You're never going to be perfect at existing, really, or anything. No one's going to be perfect at it. Like I said, I have certain fast dopamine activities that just I don't do anymore. I don't drink alcohol anymore. I limit my social media. Talking about setting limits and boundaries. Something I find really helpful is the app Focus Friend. It's from Hank and John Green. They do not collect your data. I bought the lifetime plan. I don't know if it's the same price, but just to have the little app for life was $30. And it's an app that basically bricks your phone for you for a set amount of time while this little bean that is your Focus Friend is knitting. I like it. I got the subscription version. It is also free, but there are more features, whatever. I got the paid version because I can choose which apps will still work for me while it's on. So I can still message my partners if I need to. I can still, check my fucking bank account and stuff. But I don't have access to all of the distracting shit, and I have that on a lot too. So that might be nice for setting limits. The bean's also very cute, and you decorate a little house. It's fun. I forget to decorate my house, but I use the app literally every day. But yeah, I would make a list of the things that are slow dopamine activities that you like to do. I've given you some of my examples. Then I would prioritize doing those slow dopamine activities on a regular basis, but doing something every day because your ADHD needs it. And then third, I would set limits and boundaries around fast dopamine activities, whether that be saying, I put my Focus Friend on most of the time and I only give myself a little bit of time each day to actually look at social media, which is what I do. And then fourth, remember, you're working on progress. You're not going to be perfect. I have some days where I scroll more than other days. I have some days where, I don't have any clients and I'm like, I could just do an edible with breakfast and that's my whole day. So it's not about perfection, but it's just about having more access to a lot of that attention we've lost and helping give your ADHD what it needs to help you function to the best of your ability. And now, since it's just me, I'm going to take care of the housekeeping section. Before I get to thanking our Patreon supporters, I would like to make you aware of a mutual aid opportunity. If you go to the show details, you'll find a link to the Balana Arts merch hub, and there you will find a sticker that Violet designed that says, "Fuck ICE." ICE and Operation Metro Surge have terrorized the Twin Cities area here in Minneapolis where we live, and there are a lot of people who are not able to pay their rent because of all the work they've had to miss. There are people who are dealing with legal fees. There are people who have been terrorized, really is the word for it, that need support. And mutual aid is the way that we're doing that here in Minneapolis. So 100% of the proceeds from the Fuck ICE sticker will go to mutual aid here in the Twin Cities area. I have been, for transparency, posting whenever we do make one of those donations. I posted one the other day where just in stickers, we had $44 to send to the great folks at CanMN, who is a mutual aid coalition here in Minneapolis that works on getting people the supplies they need to live. And now I'd like to thank our Patreon supporters, like Jennifer, Patch, Harleen, Bethany, Laura Kramer, Lilith Rain, Janice Weston, Anarchista, Percy, Nunya B, Kate Michigoose, K Genius, Chibs1012, Dave Peril, Megan E, Carl Brooks, Natasha Neves, Gus, Lucy, Helen Clifford, Sewing Seraph, Rachel Rachelson, and Fintago. If you would like to support us here at Mixnomer, you can tell other people about our shows. If you like this infodumpies, you like infodumpies in general, you think this solo dump would be helpful for someone you know with ADHD, if you want to share it on Discord, if you want to share it on a subreddit that you frequent, you want to share it wherever, you help us out a ton. Our shows do not have paid advertisements, and we do not pay for advertising, and we grow entirely by word of mouth. And you all tend to be real sweethearts at doing that for us, and we really appreciate it. If you want to help us out even further, you can like the show, subscribe to the show, leave a nice comment or rating on your podcatcher of choice. The more action we can get in the podcatcher that you use, the more action we get in that algorithm, the more we get recommended to people who like similar things to the things that you listen to. So by engaging with us in your podcatcher of choice, you're helping new listeners find us, and that also helps grow the show and helps us out. If you're in a place to help us out monetarily, you can go to the show details and find a link to the Mixnomer Patreon page. The Mixnomer Patreon is for anything we do here at Mixnomer. So if you listen to more than one show, that you get bonus material for all of those shows. It is a really easy way to help us. Tiers start at just $1. And if you want to come hang out with us, you'll also find a link to the Mixnomer Discord server. Genuinely the sweetest gang of little sweet baby angels you've ever met in your life. I am so proud of the just caliber of sweetheart that the stuff we make attracts. Just the best vibes. So fucking supportive. Everyone is so sweet. It has very cute animals they all share pictures of. It's really lovely. So if you want to come hang out with us, we do streams regularly. Vile to play video games. Have a regular craft club we do. I do body doubling every Monday. I do a stitch and bitch every Thursday. We have a lot of regular stuff we do to hang out and try to foster a lovely little corner of the internet, like a soft place to land. So if you want to come hang out with us, please go check out the link to the Discord server. That's all I've got for you this time, my friends. Until next time, clever sign off.